Welcome to part 2 of the game object project in Autodesk Maya. So in this tutorial we're going to cover working with layers, working with bevels, moving verts, and the duplicate special command. So we're going to try and cover a bunch in this tutorial. So the first thing I want to share with you is that basically I've taken this lightsaber a little bit further. It's not an exact match to the image off the internet here. The main one is the middle section here with the straps. I would probably model those in Mudbox and kind of bring them back with a bump map or a normal map on there to make it look cool and kind of weathered looking. So maybe I'll do a separate tutorial for that. But as you can see, I've kind of taken most everything to its conclusion, including the little diamond tip here. I'll show you how to create that in a moment here. And then we'll figure out how to duplicate it and move it around the object. So the first thing we're going to cover is working with layers. So right now, if I turn off the visibility of this lightsaber layer, you can see almost everything's in there, but there's separate elements at the top that are not part of that layer system. So if you want to add anything to a layer that's already made, all you got to do is select those objects and then right click in here and add selected objects. Now they're all added. And the first icon here in the layer stack is the visibility. So that's the main one that you're going to be using a lot. This is all located in the channel box. So if you don't have your channel box open, make sure you click open the channel box. And then down here at the bottom is your display layers. So once you have a layer set up, you can also remove objects. So I could select all of these and right click in here and remove selected objects. Now when I turn off visibility, nothing is there. So if I wanted to, I could add a new layer just by clicking on this new icon here, this one here with the plus symbol. This one here will actually add and assign the selected objects. So I think that's a better choice. So I'm just going to click on that. And then I can double click on the layer to rename it. So I can call it whatever I want. I'll just call this one Saber. And then I'll click Save. And now I turn off the visibility. You can see all those objects are on that one layer. If I want to move the object or layer down in the stack, these little arrows here kind of do that. So if I click on this, you can see it moves down further and further and further. So you can organize your layers in really cool ways. Alright, the other thing I want to point out is the template and reference. So T and R is what those stand for. So template, basically, I can't select it, and if I reference it, I can't select it either, but you can kind of see it as an image here. So I usually have that turned off. And then the third one is, so the P here means playback, and it would only render during the playback if you had an actual animation. So I don't have this animated, but I can turn off the visibility during playback if I was going to render this as an animation. So that's what the P stands for. Basically use V for the most part, the visibility. That's the main part. Alright, so let's, we covered layers here. Let's go over the bevels. So if I change my shading, turn off wireframe on shaded, and click off for a moment here, you can see I have a couple areas where there's some nice bevels along here. If I hit the 3 key to give me the smooth preview, you can kind of see here, throughout here, this section here in the middle, the bevels are really nice, but then up here, it's all kind of rubbery. And so if I hit number 1 to kind of bring it back, I would have to add bevels around certain areas. So this is where it becomes a little more tedious, a little more problematic, but basically I would either want to add, there's two different kinds of ways to do it. You can either add bevels or you can add edge loops. So some of these areas I might add edge loops. So for example, if I click on my modeling toolkit, I've added the edge loop tool down here at the bottom. But if you go to the mesh tools, go down to insert edge loop tool, that's where it's located. And I can click on that to add edge loops wherever I want on here. And watch, if I click on here and bring up, not all the way up the top, but kind of bring it real tight to this form here, and then one to about there. And then I would have to also kind of go around on the top and sort of the bottom here. So you have to end up adding lots of extra divisions here. But if I do this in a couple areas, let me Control Z that last one. I'll just do a couple here just to kind of show you like that much, and then click out. Make sure you click on the arrow when you're done. Go back to object mode, and now if I hit number 3, you'll start to see that these extra edge loops will give you that kind of neat detail. I didn't do it everywhere, so it's not quite working there, and there's other areas along here. So you basically have to decide what areas to add edge loops or to add bevels. Typically, if there's extra detail that are extrusions coming out, I add edge loops. If it's just a rounded edge like this, I can double click on this and add a bevel real easy. So I do that just by clicking on the bevel tool in your modeling toolkit. Again, modeling toolkit right here. Click on the bevel, and then I'll add a division of like 0.2, or for the fraction, and then 2 segments usually is the one I've been doing with. Now this one seems not quite as tight. I might go like 0.1, make it a little bit tighter, and then go back to object mode and kind of click out, and you can kind of see there we now have a nicer bevel as we go along here. And then if I hit number 3 and click out, you'll start to really see that bevel sort of shine there. So anyways, you got to go through and do that throughout your object, and it does take a lot of work to go around, figure out which parts to bevel and or add edge loops. Now that's the next thing I want to talk about. The next thing I want to talk about is moving verts. So if I'm in here modeling this object, and if you remember in the beginning we did this to extrude and scale, extrude through scale, you can actually go to a side view here and say you're like, well, this part here needs to be a little bit thicker, or it needs to be a little bit thicker. You can right click in here and go to vertex mode, or again click on the vertices in your component and then just drag a marquee over these areas and then hit W, and basically you can move them out. So I can change the shape of this in these orthographic views very easily. Now it's a little trickier with extrusions. You can see all the geometry coming out of here. So I wouldn't do this again after I've made the extrusions, but before I do those extrusions, if I want to change the shape here at all, like maybe I want to scale these out a little bit. Another thing that's really great is the scale tool with the vertices. I can hit R for scale and move into the perspective mode and just make sure I grab from the center here, and I can literally scale out that in perfect circle. So I'm going to undo that because I actually like the model the way it was, but I just wanted to share with you how do you move verts in your scene. So lastly, we have this little object up here, and basically it looks like kind of like a triangle, and it's actually made with a cube. So I'll kind of go through the process of making this real quick. So I'm going to click on the little cube here and hit W and just drag it up with the arrow here to the top. So basically this is what I did, is I kind of dragged it up and then I would scale it. So I flattened it, something like that, move it up. And then if you look here, there's sort of a line down the middle and then one across. Those are both edge loops. So in order to get the line exactly down the middle, if you double click on the insert edge loop tool, which again is under mesh tools, insert edge loop tool. If you go to the options by click on this little guy, it's the same thing. You can choose multiple edge loops, and instead of 2 or 3 or 4, choose 1. And when you do that, if you click on the object with this tool, it automatically centers it in the middle, which is really cool. So then you can close out or set it back to the relative distance from edge and then click out. Make sure you click on the arrow when you're done, and then you have this perfect line here in the middle. So then all you gotta do is click on this top piece here and hit W and kind of pull it forward. So that's basically how I got the shape. Then I add another edge loop across here. So if I add the insert edge loop tool one more time and just sort of click in the middle here. Now notice that the angle of this edge loop is following this angle here. In order to fix this to go straight across, if I use my scale tool by hitting R and grab the green cube and drag downwards, I can flatten it out. So it goes straight out flat now. But now I can reshape this. So if I wanted to, I could pull this in and get this kind of effect essentially. So then I would just grab the bottom verts, and this is best in vertice mode. So drag across these guys and kind of scale them in and to some amount, and then basically just spend a little time kind of forming these. So maybe these I brought down a little bit further, but basically get the idea here. Then I added just a couple bevels. If you look at this one, I added some bevels, and then I moved it back and into position. So I scaled it down and kind of slid it over. So I'm not going to show that part. So I'll actually just delete this one here. So to get this into position, after I get this in position, now it's real easy to duplicate it around this object here. And the way you do this, you can see here that my pivot's centered here. But if I want to duplicate around an object in a circle, we need to group it, and then the center point will be at the center of the stage. This is why it's critical not to move your object when you're modeling in the beginning. Don't move the object, rotate in any way until you're completely done. So I'm going to group this by hitting Control G. That's the hotkey for grouping. And if I hit W, you'll see the pivot is way down here at the center of the stage. So now the pivot's in the correct location. Now we can use the duplicate spatial command. So I'm going to go to Edit and go down to Duplicate Special, and I'm going to go into the options. I'm going to click the little square here to go in the options. And from here, all I got to do is figure out what I'm doing here. I'm going to rotate around the y-axis. And it happens to be, because there's enough area here, it's going to be 45 degrees. I just figured this out ahead of time. But if you didn't know, you could type in whatever degree, and then you're just going to pick however many copies here. So for my instance, I need 7, so I just drag a slider to 7. Now, I'm going to copy these, but I could have them as instances of each other. Instances will basically allow them to, if I modify this one, all the others will modify instantly, which is kind of cool. If I did copies, they'd all be kind of unique. So I'll show you what instancing looks like here, because this is kind of fun. So I'll go ahead and click Apply. And just like that, they all rotate around because I'm rotating around the y-axis. Again, the way I knew that is because when I look at the arrows here, this is the y, so we're rotating around that y and 45 degrees, and then basically just 7 times around. So watch when I click on this and go into vertice mode. If I select these verts on here and say I want to change the shape of this, so as I move it, all the other ones update, which is pretty cool. So that's what instancing allows you to do. If you did a direct copy, they would be independent. I have to go around and do each one independently. So that's basically, in a nutshell, all I wanted to cover for this tutorial. It's a lot. We covered layers, working with bevels, moving verts, and the duplicate special command. So until next time, see you soon in Autodesk Maya. Cheers!